The storming of the Bastille was a big wake-up call for everyone in France. The king, Louis XVI, decided to show his support for the revolutionaries instead of stopping it in its tracks. He showed his support by wearing a revolutionary cockade hat, but he would soon receive blowback, and the man that was once at the center of the country is going to be cast aside. The revolutionaries will soon be knocking down his palace's gilded doors to place him in a cage. Hello and welcome to the channel. I am of course the Knight of History, and this is part number 2 of a 5-part series all about the French Revolution. In this episode we're going to talk about, spoiler alert here, the execution and the Reign of Terror. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I know it seems like such a trivial thing, but really it helps the show perhaps more than you could know. So please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Now, let's get into this. Quicker than expected, the National Assembly had taken control of the entire country through popular uprisings. Their mission was to write a new constitution, which would of course mean that the rights would protect the people and limit the power of the king. On the 5th of August, the Assembly abolished the ancient use of feudalism, freeing France's peasantry from their obligations to the nobles. Then, on the 26th of August 1789, the Assembly passed down a bill known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man. This amazing document represented government, freedom of speech, and equality before the law for all French citizens. All while this is happening, the revolutionaries rounded up those that opposed them, clergy and nobles, and had them killed, and some of them in prison. The country was in absolute panic. The revolutionaries cried out, liberty, equality, and fraternity, the fundamentals of the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Louis XVI was sometimes supportive of the revolutionaries, and sometimes he opposed them. But when his friends' palaces started to get overrun with revolutionaries, he began to panic, and rightfully so, because on October the 6th, 1789, Louis XVI's Palace of Versailles had become overrun with revolutionaries, who forced the royal family to their palace in Paris. The royal family came freely, but essentially, they were now prisoners. Now we have to understand here that there was actually relatively broad support in France for the reforms in the National Assembly, but this did not last too long. France's population became increasingly polarized between individuals who wanted a more radical change to happen quicker and those who thought that the revolution was going too far. The National Assembly needed to raise money to pay for their reforms, of course. So in November 1789, they dipped into the massive depositories of the Catholic Church, confiscating all of their lands. This followed, of course, by more anti-Catholic reforms, such as exiling priests that are against the revolution, causing many of the French Catholics who supported the revolution to turn against it. Within the National Assembly itself, radicals tended to sit towards the left of the king's chair, whilst the defenders of the king sat on the right of the king's chair, giving birth to the modern terms of left and right-wing politics. By June 1791, the once powerful king Louis XVI had had enough of being a prisoner. So he, along with his family, hatched a plan to escape. Louis XVI once supported the revolutionaries, but before he left his palace in Paris, he wrote a letter to the French people denouncing the revolution and attacking the National Assembly. He decided he was going to take himself and his family to launch a counter-revolution with the French loyalists. Louis left on the 21st of June, going against the advice of courtiers. Instead of taking a small mobile carriage, which would be able to move quickly and blend in, the king and queen didn't want to split up the royal family, so they used this huge, heavy, conspicuous carriage pulled by 6 horses. Now, obviously, this is just silly. People noticed him. Massive carriage, gold, 6 horses, enormous. And they noticed them changing horses as they went. The king would talk to people that were helping them. The queen would give out silver dishes to people that were helpful to them as well. And a postmaster, Jean-Baptiste Durat, at Saint-Ménard, recognized the carriage, and it was drawing a crowd. Then he noticed the king, and he had the royal family arrested. This whole episode would become known as the flight to Varennes, because that's where they were going. It would become the biggest mistake of Louis XVI's life. The revolutionaries lost trust in their king, and the hatred for the Austrian wife, Marie Antoinette, grew. The distrust was made even worse when Marie Antoinette's brother, the Austrian emperor, began to prepare to invade France and restore Louis as an absolute ruler, the king of old. This led the National Assembly to declare war on both Austria and Prussia in June 1792, which saw hundreds of thousands of Frenchmen volunteering to join up with the Revolutionary Army and defend the revolution against foreign invasion. This extremism led to violence. Parisian revolutionaries from the lower classes, i.e. the peasantry, were known as sans-culottes, without breeches, which were worn by the aristocracy and bourgeoisie. And they had been causing havoc in the city, gathering up support from the army. In the summer of 1792, a group of volunteers marched from Marseille in the south of France to meet up with a revolutionary in Paris. One of the army officers wrote the revolutionary anthem called Marseille, which would be sung as they marched. Today, this anthem is actually the national anthem of France. The sans-culottes kept causing havoc. That was until the 10th of August 1792. You have to imagine here that these poor people were worried that foreign nations were going to put down their revolution, which is actually exactly what Louis XVI wanted. So they broke into his palace with 20,000 revolutionaries, causing an insurrection. Louis XVI tried to buy off the leaders of this insurrection, but he failed. Louis XVI had around 1,200 men to defend him, and they failed. 600 of them died. They killed actually 300 revolutionaries of the 20,000 that were there. Now, seeing all of this death and despair, Louis XVI actually surrendered and was dragged off with his family to the Square du Temple, a prison. A few days later, on the 21st of September 1792, the National Assembly abolished the monarchy. A monarchy that had lasted for more than 1,000 years at this point. Louis XVI was, however, still in communication with Prussia, Austria, and Great Britain, who decided to come and save him and put him back on the French throne. We must think here that the crowned heads of Europe didn't want to mess with revolutionaries. They didn't want this revolutionary mess to come to their lands. The Prussians were marching through France, and when it was discovered that Louis was actually supporting them, the National Assembly decided that he was dangerous. So they had a trial for him, and he was tried for treason and executed by a guillotine on the 25th of June, 1793. 1 year later, Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, was executed as well. Their son, the Dauphin of France, the Crown Prince, was never seen again, probably killed in prison. After the execution of Louis XVI, France spiraled into utter chaos. The Revolutionary Army was fighting to protect itself at its borders against Austria, Prussia, and Britain. At the same time, there was a civil war going on. Counter-revolutionaries were fighting the revolutionaries. Some people wanted the monarchy back, others wanted anti-Catholic revolutionaries to close down all the churches, force priests into hiding, and they actually stated a new religion called the cult of the Supreme Being. Now, with all this mess happening in France, the French colonies revolted as well. Famously, the Haitians led the very first ever successful slave uprising after reading the Declaration of the Rights of Man. The entire French government broke down. France was a mess. With the country in a state of utter anarchy, a group of uncompromising revolutionaries called the Jacobins took control of France. They were led by Maximilien Robespierre, and he began what is known as the Reign of Terror. The Jacobins began executing anyone who was suspected of being counter-revolutionaries by guillotine. The guillotines were designed to ensure that all executions were effective and equal in the nature, and they were erected around the town squares across the country. Aristocrats, clergymen, members of the bourgeoisie, even members of Robespierre's following found their end at the guillotine, and the bodies were piling up in the wagon loads. In all, 17,000 were sentenced to death for being enemies of the revolution, whilst another 23,000 unauthorized killings are thought to have taken place in just 1 year. Eventually, opposition to Robespierre's reign of terror grew, and then he too was arrested and sentenced to death by guillotine on the 27th of July, 1794. The worst bits of the revolution are finally over, but all of this madness left the door open for one man to sweep in. Le Petit Corporal, the small corporal, is about to take stage. Napoleon is near. We'll discuss his meteoric rise in the next episode. I really hope that you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The more you know.